Hi, it's Katrina. Today I'm going to share some mysterious ancient secrets that remain unsolved to this day. From the Eye of Providence to an island that keeps vanishing and then reappearing. If that sounds good, then be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos about secrets of the ancient world. The Eye of Providence. The Eye of Providence, otherwise known as the Eye of Horus, is a mystical ancient symbol you likely look at every single day without realizing its significance. In ancient Egypt, they called it the Wadjet. The magical eye was thought of as a protective sigil. People would tattoo it on their bodies, they would carve the symbol out of wood or etch it out of stone, then wear it around their neck for protection. The symbol was associated with health and rejuvenation. The Eye of Horus was even popular among the dead. The symbol can be seen in countless Egyptian tombs, painted on walls and left inside sarcophagi in the form of amulets. But where did the Wadjet get its start? At the beginning of Egyptian civilization, Osiris was the king of the lands. And according to the myth, Osiris was a real human king. It's part of the larger mythology that the Egyptians were descendants of their gods, who came down from the stars. Some compare this mythology to the ancient gods from Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki. But is this all just a coincidence? Maybe not. Osiris ruled Egypt unopposed until his brother Set became jealous. Set then murdered his brother and took the throne. Osiris's wife, Isis, was so devastated that she brought her husband back from the dead using either ancient magic or alien technology. It depends on your interpretation of the myth. With Osiris alive once more, Isis became pregnant with their son Horus. However, Osiris's resurrection was only temporary. He and Isis were forced to withdraw from the land of the living into the underworld, while Set stayed on the throne above ground. When Horus became an adult man, he defeated his uncle Set in a great battle to avenge his father. And during the fight between the two gods, Horus lost one of his eyes. In that regard, Horus was extremely similar to the Viking god Odin, who also lost an eye. Although the stories are vastly different. In Norse myth, Odin pulled out his eye and traded it for divine wisdom. Odin never got his eyeball back, but Horus did. Odin had lots of magic but poor depth perception. Horus's eye was magically restored by Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom. So, yet again, you can see the Norse-Egyptian connection. Horus and Odin both lost their eyes, and both stories involve wisdom and magic. The resurrected eyeball became a symbol of magic, mysticism, mathematics, and so much more. Having the symbol was to have the protection of Horus himself. But how did an Egyptian god's eyeball make it onto the US $1 bill? Make no mistake, this is the Eye of Horus on the dollar bill. It's hard to miss the Egyptian connection when the eyeball is in the center of a triangle at the top of a pyramid. The eye is featured in churches across the globe, in Masonic buildings, and in Christianity. This is a symbol used by both the Illuminati and the Catholic Church. The disembodied eyeball evolved after Egypt's reign came to an end. Christians started using it to signify the all-seeing eye of God. The eyeball inside a triangle or a pyramid appears in artwork from across the Middle Ages. It represented God to medieval artists, just like the Eye of Horus represented the magic of the old gods to the Egyptians. The eyeball on the dollar bill was created by Charles Thomson, Secretary of the Continental Congress. Charles chose to use the eye for the Great Seal of the United States of America. The unfinished pyramid it hovers over has 13 levels, which represent the 13 original states. The eyeball was a symbol of God's watchfulness over the new nation. Even if it was used as a Christian symbol, the eye still came from ancient Egypt. What are your thoughts on the bizarre Eye of Horus and its position on the $1 bill? Let me know in the comments below. The Devilish Dolmans. When you think of Belgium, is chocolate the first thing that comes to mind? If so, I can sympathize with you completely. Belgium is known for its delicious chocolate. Plus, let's not forget its equally delicious waffles. But Belgium is also home to its own Stonehenge. The Belgian Stonehenge is one of multiple stone circles known as the Waris megaliths. There are several of them surrounding what was once a Neolithic burial site. The stone structures are completely unique in Belgium, with experts only guessing as to what they could have been used for. The megaliths have been dated to roughly 3000 BC, 500 years before the creation of the Sphinx. Scientists think a prehistoric society named the Sen-Ois-Marne culture built the enormous stone monuments by hand. The Somme culture, as they are known, wandered around Belgium and France during the Stone Age. They have been identified as a unique culture because of their complex pottery and giant stone creations. The Waris megaliths are dolmens, which were used across the ancient world. Dolmens were used in the UK, Europe, and as far away as Korea. Nobody's ever figured out why so many cultures built the same stone monoliths. Each dolmen was made sort of like a house of cards, only using huge slabs of stone. Scientists think these particular dolmens were used for a few different purposes. Elite members of Stone Age society could have been buried underneath them. They also may have been used in magical ritual ceremonies. The ceremonies likely involved ancestral worship, with the primitive humans paying homage to those who came before them. The Sonian Forest is the Belgian version of Stonehenge. It's one of only a handful that is still standing. Researchers think there were likely dozens, maybe hundreds of similar stone circles consisting of dolmens across Belgium, but sadly the rest have been lost to the decay of time. One of the weirdest dolmens is called La Pierre Haina. Only a tiny fragment of it is left, rising from the dirt like a tombstone. Local legend says that it was used as a plug to seal a portal to hell. However, the plug didn't work very well. Villagers painted the stone white to keep the devil from pushing the stone aside and escaping, causing havoc. White is the color of purity after all, which is believed to make the stone stronger. For centuries, villagers would gather at the stone each autumnal equinox to paint it white and keep the devil in hell where he belongs. And now it's shoutout time! I want to give a huge thank you to Jennifer Ballesteri, who is a longtime viewer, and Daniel Holland 20 Twin for supporting this channel. I am so happy to be a part of your day and hope it's a great one. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you are new here for more videos like these. Secrets of language. How weird would it be to have a bronze hand instead of one made of flesh and blood? Not many people know the answer to that question, except perhaps a man who lived in Spain 2,000 years ago. Archaeologists recently found a bronze hand covered in strange symbols. I'm not saying it was used as a prosthetic, only that it's a weird artifact with no obvious use. Inscribed on the hand's surface are 4 lines of weird characters that appear to be from an ancient language. Scientists think the hand could help them unlock the secrets of a language that hasn't been spoken in millennia. In northern Spain, 20 centuries ago, a tribe known as the Vascones dominated the landscape. They had always been thought of by anthropologists as fairly primitive. They weren't dumb by any means, I would never suggest that, but the Vascones weren't building spaceships or paving roads across Europe. Nobody was even sure if they had a written language. The Vascones were assumed to have been something called pre-literate. Pre-literate is a nice way of saying illiterate, or just existing before literacy. The Vascones definitely spoke a language, but no writing samples were found until the discovery of the bronze hand. But now it looks like the Vascones did indeed have a language. More than that, their mysterious language was a precursor to modern Basque, which is still spoken in Spain today. The inscription hasn't been deciphered yet, and maybe it never will be, but archaeologists are working to make sense of the artifact and its cryptic message. How to vote in ancient Greece. Have you ever wondered how people voted in the ancient world? If you said yes, you're not alone. Historians have been trying to figure out how the earliest democratic societies in the world used to cast their ballots. Most of the information on ancient voters comes from Athens. Athens, the modern capital of Greece and the ancient capital of the Mediterranean, was one of the first real democracies on the planet. Historians don't know exactly when the first group of people got together to vote for a leader. But Athens was the first big city where it went down. But what about the Roman Republic? Even before the Roman Empire, the Romans weren't exactly a direct democracy. A group of extremely wealthy Romans held far more influence than the working class. The Senate dictated what happened in the Roman government, not everyday folks with ballot cards. Still, though, there was voting in Rome. In both Rome and Athens, only a few people were able to vote. And I'm sure you could guess who those few people were if it came down to it. Even in Athens, which you hear so frequently being hailed as a progressive, democratic paradise that would make Seattle look like a dictatorship, only men could vote. Women weren't allowed to vote, and neither were slaves, obviously. Professor of history at Indiana University, Eric Robinson, said the chief governing body of Athens consisted of a council of 500 men. The city was divided into 10 tribes, with each tribe providing 50 people to serve for a single year on the council. Each man who was eligible to be on the council was given a personalized token. Through a system of tubes and balls, the random men were chosen once a year. The actual voting wasn't for who would be on the council. The voting was held in an assembly inside an amphitheater at the top of the hill. Around 600 to 13,000 people would show up to vote on things like laws and public court cases. Researchers think that voting involved either raising hands or screaming. There was also the thumbs up or the thumbs down technique. Every year, 10 new generals were picked to lead the armies of Athens using the thumbs up system. There is still a lot that historians don't know about the political system in ancient Athens. The whole part about choosing random representatives does sound pretty intriguing. But would you be okay with members of Congress being chosen through what would essentially be a random lottery every year? Unexplainable lines. Of all the geoglyphs in the world, and there are many, the Uffington White Horse, the Amazonian geoglyphs, the Kazakhstan glyphs, the Atacama Giant, the Nazca lines are perhaps the most baffling. But with a recent observation, they've gotten even weirder. If you're unfamiliar with the other glyphs I just mentioned, be sure to check out more videos from the channel for deep dives into those. Until then, why is there an Indian mandala in Peru? In ancient India, the mandala was a symbol that represented the universe. It was a sign of the infinite cosmos and the unending cycle of life. It was a mystical representation of all things living, dead, and yet to be born. When the Nazca lines were carved an estimated 2,000 years ago, nobody from the Indian subcontinent had ever been to South America. There isn't any proof of it, at least. Though to be fair, nobody knows who may have gotten into a boat and set sail for new worlds. Still, it seems unlikely that Indians were in Peru before the birth of Christ. This is an important part to know because of the mandala discovered in the Nazca Desert. It's a massive carving that's about 180 feet across. It takes a little bit of imagination to see the mandala clearly because time has not done any favors to the geoglyph. But by highlighting the remaining lines, you can clearly see the similarities with a traditional Indian mandala. There's nothing I can say to help solve this mystery, nor do the experts understand how an ancient cosmic symbol from India ended up in Peru. There are over 800 straight lines, around 300 geometric figures, and nearly 100 biomorphs that compose the totality of the Nazca lines. The mandala formation is only one of hundreds of symbols that remain misunderstood. Did you know that the longest glyph in Nazca is 9 miles long? A popular theory is that the lines were used as some sort of extraterrestrial airport. If you've ever flown into an airport, you have no doubt looked down from your window to see the confusing array of lines on the ground. The Nazca lines look sort of similar from the air. It's possible that this whole desert was a landing strip for creatures that were not from this world. Ragnarok. The Vikings of 1,000 years ago had Ragnarok to look forward to. Or did they already experience it 1,500 years ago? Ragnarok in Norse myth is the cataclysmic battle between good and evil, almost identical to the biblical battle of Armageddon. Armageddon is when the Antichrist will supposedly show up to duke it out with Jesus and the forces of righteousness. Just like the Battle of Armageddon, Ragnarok may have already happened in ancient times. Ragnarok may have been an apocalyptic volcano eruption that took place in 536 AD. Armageddon may have been a real battle between Roman soldiers and an unidentified enemy 1800 years ago. Let's focus on Ragnarok, though, before I break into a million tangents. Ragnarok is known as the fate of the gods. It is the epic ending of the 9 realms of Norse cosmology. This cycle began with the birth of the Aesir gods, the Marvel heroes from Asgard, like Thor and Odin. The gods established order across the 9 realms by restraining the violent forces of chaos. Ragnarok happens when those forces break free, spilling into the world with their hearts full of vengeance. Even though the gods know that Ragnarok is coming and that the world will be destroyed, they march fearlessly into battle to fight. In 536, the temperature suddenly plunged across all of Europe. The Northern Hemisphere experienced a cooling event so profound that if it happened today, civilization could collapse. And I'm not just being dramatic. The temperature fell by about 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. This resulted in a volcanic winter in which the sky turned black and crops wilted. People lived a year of darkness in which there was nothing to eat. The event is well documented. There are descriptions of it all across the UK. Texts in ancient China mention snowfall in August. Everyone from the Romans to the Moche culture of Peru experienced the devastating effects of the volcanic eruption. Medieval scholar Michael McCormick called 536 AD the worst year to be alive, not just because of the volcanic winter, but also because of the war between the Romans and the Vandals. In the world of the Vikings, or rather their Norse relatives, since the Viking Age hadn't started yet, there was a great migration. The migration coincided with the eternal winter of 536. Recent scholars have suggested that the forced migration of the Norse people, coupled with a catastrophic wave of fatalities, may have influenced the creation of the legend of Ragnarok. As for the naughty volcano, nobody has ever discovered exactly which one caused the worst year in human history. Maybe it wasn't even a volcano. Scientists are still struggling to understand precisely what happened. Oh, and I forgot to mention that King Arthur was involved. Yes, the legendary King Arthur who sat at Camelot with the wizard Merlin and his brave knight Lancelot. In 2020, philologist Andrew Breeze argued that King Arthur rose to power as a consequence of the volcanic eruption. A veil of smoke coated the land and famine spread, and King Arthur showed up to bring order to the darkness. I bet you didn't think Ragnarok was so complex. Burying the dead. What is it that makes a human being a human? Or maybe a better way of asking is, what first differentiated humans from our primal ancestors? Was it our ability to create abstract artwork? Was it the ability to communicate clearly in a group? Or was it burying the dead? Scientists have puzzled over this question for centuries. Since scholars of ancient Greece sat down to drink wine and ponder, they have wondered what makes humans so human. Now, scientists have found that you and I might not be so special. Homo naledi is an extinct member of the human family tree. It was a small creature with a small brain. Yet scientists recently discovered evidence that Homo naledi was burying its dead 100,000 years before Homo sapiens. It's tough to express how important this discovery is. If confirmed, it means that the advanced behavior of human beings isn't so advanced. Deep inside a South African cave, Homo naledi was more human than us 335,000 years ago. The discovery of the burial came from within the Rising Star Cave system, which you may have heard of before. It's the most famous cave in Africa, 25 miles from Johannesburg. Inside the cavern were the remains of a creature that had a brain only a third the size of a modern human brain. The creature also possessed a weird mixture of anatomical features, some of them human and some of them sort of monkeyish. But the discovery hasn't done much to help solve any important questions on human evolution. It's only made things more confusing. If this Homo naledi was found here buried in the ground, that means that somebody took the time and effort to dig the hole and probably had a ceremony of some sort to go with it. Did they feel sadness? Did they feel loss? So how smart were they? What do you think? The fourth pyramid. The fourth pyramid of Giza is standing within a short camel ride of the Great Pyramid and most people don't even know it exists. It isn't as big as the other three, nor is it really much of a pyramid at this point due to deterioration. But in the 5th dynasty, it was a monumental burial tomb for a queen. There are 3 major pyramids at Giza that most people are familiar with. There's the Pyramid of Khufu, or the Great Pyramid. Then there are the 2 smaller pyramids built for pharaohs Khafre and Menkaure. These are the little brothers to the Great Pyramid. But have you ever noticed the 3 subsidiary pyramids at Giza? It's believed that these were all built for Khufu's brides. Look at the size of Khufu's pyramid compared to the 3 small ones situated in front of it. Do you think his wives got ripped off in the pyramid department? Or should they be happy that they were even given their own pyramids at all? Away from the 3 major pyramids and the smaller pyramids, there stand the sad ruins of the 4th pyramid. Okay, how many times am I going to say pyramid today? This pointy stone triangle belonged to Queen Mother Khentkhals I. Nobody knows exactly who the queen was or who her parents were, and it's unclear how long she ruled. One popular explanation is that she was the daughter of Pharaoh Menkaure. She may have also been the wife of King Shepseskaf and King Usarkaf, though likely at different times. Then again, who knows what was going on in the 5th dynasty? She may have also been the mother of King Sahure, or she herself may have been the queen of Upper and Lower Egypt. I like to think she was the undisputed queen and ruled with an iron fist. Scientists excavated Khentkhals' tomb in 1837. But the mystery of the Queen Mother still isn't solved. She was the only royal woman to have gotten her own private tomb at Giza. Khufu's wives don't really count since they were put at the foot of his pyramid and didn't get their own. Obsidian and gold. On a random scrap of ranch land in the Texas Panhandle, a tiny obsidian artifact was found. The small relic made its way to anthropologist Matthew Bolanger at Southern Methodist University. Amazingly, he traced the obsidian artifact to Francisco Vázquez de Coronado and the lost city of El Dorado. The artifact itself was little more than a knife, a stone tool chipped to have a sharp edge. But it's where the artifact came from that has connected it to the famous Spanish explorer and the fabled city. Matthew believes it was dropped by a member of Francisco's fateful expedition across Mexico and into Texas. According to the legend, Francisco set out from Mexico in 1540 with the biggest expeditionary force ever assembled in North America. At least it was the biggest at the time. The expedition had one goal: to find the 7 cities of gold, also known as Cibola and El Dorado. Historians know that the expedition happened, but its specific details are a little shaky. Francisco led his forces from Mexico into Arizona, then into New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, and lastly Kansas, but they never found a legendary city. He and the team did find the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River, but it turned out that they had been lied to. There was no city of gold, no El Dorado, and no riches whatsoever. Francisco returned to Mexico City in 1542. The journey had bankrupted him, plus he was badly injured. Flat broke and disgraced for chasing a myth, he was brought up on charges of war crimes. Francisco ended up dying in Mexico City from an infectious disease in 1554. His expedition was the very definition of disaster. But what I find really interesting, and so do historians, is that almost no physical evidence has ever been found of his journey, except for this tiny speck of obsidian. Analysis of the dark blade shows that it was made in central Mexico. It's a known fact that Francisco brought African and indigenous slaves on his journey with him. The obsidian knife was likely carried by someone who had crafted it in Mexico and then lost it during the expedition while moving through Texas. The mystery remains as to precisely which route Francisco took on his failed trip to find a city that probably doesn't exist. Many have gone in search of El Dorado, from the jungles of Ecuador to Kansas, but none have ever found it. The petroglyphs of Hawaii. When tourists visit Hawaii, they are interested in big waves, big sun, and big relaxation. But Hawaii is also home to some very peculiar petroglyphs, not to mention the ancient ruins. They aren't called petroglyphs in Hawaii. Local Hawaiians call the ancient rock art Ki'i'i Pohaku. There are over 100 sites filled with rock art spread across the islands. But who made them, and what do they mean? The early Polynesian Hawaiians who lived on the islands before Europeans arrived had no known written language. Even though this was only 4 centuries ago, they hadn't come up with the written word yet. That's not to say the Hawaiians couldn't record information. They were still humans after all. They still had a language that they spoke, and they recorded important events in their own unique way, typically by carving figures into lava rocks. For hundreds of years, Hawaiians recorded births, political events, important rituals, and religious epiphanies in volcanic rock. Most of the petroglyphs are undoubtedly lost at this point, but many of them that survive can be found along footpaths that weave through treacherous lava fields. The Waikoloa petroglyph field is thought to be the biggest rock art site on Hawaii's Big Island. Hawaiians settled here around 1400 AD, though they may have visited as early as 1000 AD. The field is covered in spectacular works of art, but nobody knows what any of them mean. The Waikoloa petroglyph field is 233 acres of pure mystery, 233 acres of rock art depicting humans, ships, chickens, weapons, and messages that will likely never be deciphered. The ruins of villages, farming settlements from 7 centuries ago, and undecipherable petroglyphs are all over Hawaii. The complex nature of the original islanders is lost in the translation of these spectacular pictograms. It's honestly shocking that so much history is gone. To understand what I mean, take a look at the ruins of Lapakahi village. There is no recorded history of the people who lived in this village. Even still, much of it remains standing. There is a historic house with a bamboo frame and grass thatch roofs that was last occupied in the 1900s. People lived the traditional way of life until only a century ago, yet their history has been lost. The people of the village built a fishing shrine where they left offerings to the gods. They dug wells, built rock walls, constructed roads, and threw up residential complexes. But the secret to understanding their rituals is lost in the baffling nature of their petroglyphs. If you've ever been to Hawaii and have seen any of these villages or petroglyphs for yourself, please tell me about them in the comments. I would love to hear your take on them. This is arguably a very important mystery. The missing island. There are 7 islands in the Spanish archipelago known as the Canary Islands. Each island is a little different from its neighbor, with a unique culture and unimaginable landscapes. Collectively, the Canary Islands are known around the world for being a premier vacation destination. But did you know that one of the Canary Islands is a ghost? There is a mysterious 8th island that's part myth, part phantom, and 100% invisible. Its name is San Borondon, and it has an extensive history. Explorers have seen it, they've touched it, they've documented it, but in modern times, nobody has ever been able to prove it exists. Or maybe I should say, nobody's ever been able to prove it existed. San Borondon has such a long history in Spain that a quick journey in Google Maps will give you an idea of its influence. You can find streets and neighborhoods named after San Borondon. It was important enough in the past to become a popular name. Here's what I know about its history. The very first documented sighting came in the 9th century by Saint Brendan, a legendary navigator and seafarer. Brendan was also an Irish monk who took sketchy directions from a giant fish. Part of Brendan's legend is that he only found the island because he was guided to it by a big wet fish. How much of the story you want to believe is totally up to you. Centuries later, in 1290 AD, San Borondon was included on the Hereford Planisphere as the 8th island in the Canary Islands. It was supposedly 124 miles from La Palma and had one giant volcano at each end of it. The last documented appearance of the vanishing island was in 1755 on Gautier's geographical chart. Many sailors told stories of landing on the island and marveling at its beautiful shoreline. But still, there was no definitive proof it existed outside maritime legend. That is, until a picture showed up in 1958. A man named Manuel Rodriguez Quintero snapped a photograph of the island and then had it published in a local Spanish newspaper. The image showed the outline of a large landmass many miles away from where Manuel was vacationing on La Palma. However, scientists discredited the photo. They said it was an optical illusion, nothing more than a mirage on the horizon. To this day, the mystery of the 8 Canary Islands has never been solved. The Sphinx revealed. Researchers are still trying to solve the mystery of the Great Sphinx of Egypt. It's a mystery that has endured for 4,500 years. Even in the days of Queen Cleopatra, nobody knew where the Sphinx came from. The knowledge was lost even to the ancient Egyptians. Don't worry though, there's still hope. A group of scientists from the New York University recently published their research into this iconic monument. They claim to have cracked the mystery wide open, revealing shocking secrets of the past. To understand the mysteries of the Sphinx, scientists replicated it. They didn't build a model Sphinx to size, although that would have been pretty cool. Instead, they took a large amount of soft clay and exposed it to streams of water. This was a way to mimic tens of thousands of years of wind erosion. And when the experiment was over, the giant pile of clay looked strangely similar to the Sphinx. Wait, am I really saying this right now? Did real scientists suggest that the Sphinx was made from wind erosion? Senior author of the study, Leif Ristroff, said Sphinx-like shapes can be made by water, rain, and wind. The experiment, although it might seem crazy, did result in a mushy hunk of clay that looked similar to the Sphinx. It even had the human-like face and the paws lying flat on the ground with the Sphinx's iconic arched back. The idea of the Sphinx being nothing but a random piece of rock has been around for over 40 years. Geologist Farouk El-Baz came up with the theory in 1981. Now, you likely want to know if the theory is true. Personally, I doubt it, and so do a lot of other experts in the field of Egyptology. The long-standing mainstream theory is that the Sphinx was made for a pharaoh around the year 2500 BC. It would have been chiseled by hand, not formed by random gusts of wind. The fact that these kinds of experiments are happening in the modern age just proves how unsolvable the origin of the Sphinx really is. Nobody knows where its nose went, whose face it originally had, or what's hiding beneath it. However, there is one rumor that you may have heard before. The rumor is that the Sphinx is guarding a subterranean library filled with books that were thought to be lost in the fire that burned down the Library of Alexandria. What are your thoughts on the Sphinx? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already.